When a typical crisis hits, there is usually a horizon line.
Right.
Like, you can see the storm rolling in, but your brain fundamentally understands that the sun is still out there somewhere behind the weather front. It's a finite problem.
Exactly. You just sort of board up the windows and wait it out.
Right. You conserve your resources, you weather the impact. But what happens to the human psyche when you look up and realize the sky hasn't just clouded over, but has been, actively erased?
Oh, wow. Yeah.
When the darkness isn't a weather event, but an unnatural, suffocating force that actively wants to extinguish your existence? Waiting it out ceases to be an option.
It really does. And that is the threshold between a difficult challenge and a true existential threat. The horizon just completely disappears.
Yeah.
And once that visual and psychological boundary is gone, the cognitive toll it takes on a leader or even just an ordinary person becomes the defining factor of their survival.
Welcome to the deep dive. Today we have a highly specific and honestly absolutely fascinating stack of sources to explore with you.
We really do.
We are looking at a recent Indonesian translation of J.R.R. Tolkien's The Return of the King. Specifically, we're tearing into the synopsis and the epic first 4 chapters of Book 5, which includes Minas Tirith, the passing of the Grey Company, the muster of Rohan, and the Siege of Gondor.
Right, where the entire board is essentially being set for the Siege of Gondor.
Exactly. But our goal here isn't just to recap a fantasy story you probably already know.
No, our mission for this deep dive is to extract the core nuggets of wisdom about how people, and specifically leaders, react when faced with absolute existential darkness.
Yeah.
We want to explore the psychological breaking points of these characters as the dawnless day descends upon the world and see how this specific translation reframes those moments.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because if you look at the macro scale of these chapters, you have these massive geopolitical movements, right?
Totally.
The clashing of huge armies, the breaking of ancient cities. Yet the narrative fundamentally anchors all of this overwhelming dread on the smallest, most relatable characters.
Yeah, that's the structural brilliance of those opening chapters. We don't experience the onset of the dawnless day from the perspective of a battlefield commander mapping out troop movements.
Right. Our lenses are Merry and Pippin, 2 ordinary hobbits.
Exactly. You have 2 individuals who possess absolutely zero tactical value in this theater of war, suddenly thrust into the epicenter of a continental collapse.
Which is terrifying. Think about Pippin riding Shadowfax with Gandalf to the 7-tiered city of Minas Tirith. He is completely out of his depth.
Completely.
He stands before Denethor, the cold, calculating lord of the city. And instead of keeping his head down and staying out of the way, Pippin just draws his sword and impulsively offers his service to Denethor out of guilt over Boromir's sacrifice.
And then meanwhile, Merry does the exact same thing over in Rohan.
Yes. Merry feels like useless baggage among these towering warriors, so he offers his sword to King Theoden out of this sudden, genuine love for the old king.
He becomes an esquire of Rohan.
Right. And think about extreme imposter syndrome. You're sitting in a boardroom of CEOs, or in this case, a fortress of legendary warriors, and you're just a hobbit from the Shire.
Yeah, you're tiny.
Your first instinct shouldn't be to volunteer. It's kind of like a spacewalk. If you step out of an airlock into the terrifying void of space, your first instinct isn't to float freely. You immediately attach a tether to the nearest massive object.
That is a phenomenal analogy.
Thanks.
And what's fascinating here is how the Indonesian text handles that concept of the tether. Because when we read oath or service in English, it often carries this transactional, almost medieval legal weight.
Right, like a contract.
Exactly. But the Indonesian translation frequently utilizes the concept of bhakti or pengabdian.
Oh, wait, what does that mean exactly?
Well, bhakti doesn't just mean a contractual obligation to a boss. It carries a profound cultural weight of devotion, like a cosmic or moral duty. It's often used in the context of filial piety or deep spiritual dedication.
Wow. So by swearing bhakti, they aren't just joining an army, they're essentially anchoring their sanity.
Precisely. Because as the dawnless day begins, which in the text is a literal thick, brown, suffocating cloud sent from Mordor to blot out the sun, the raw terror of the enemy is designed to isolate the mind.
Yeah, the screaming Nazgul and all that.
Right. Sauron's primary weapon isn't really the orcs. It's the psychological isolation of fear. The hobbits combat that dread by violently asserting their agency through loyalty. They find meaning by committing to an active bhakti.
The tether gives them a reason to just put one foot in front of the other in the dark.
Exactly. It's their survival mechanism.
But, okay, so they anchor themselves to the massive objects in the room, right? The leaders. Which begs the question, how do those very leaders handle the incoming apocalypse?
That is the million-dollar question.
Because Merry and Pippin bind themselves to Denethor and Theoden, and those two leaders process the incoming data of their own doom using completely divergent operating systems.
We are looking at two contrasting faces of leadership. Let's look at Denethor first.
The Lord of Gondor.
Right. Denethor is highly intelligent, calculating, and accustomed to supreme command. He clashes with Gandalf over the ring because Denethor believes his own wisdom is supreme.
He actually says he would have hidden the ring deep away rather than risking it with a foolish halfling.
Exactly. And when his surviving son Faramir returns and reveals he let Frodo go, Denethor is furious. He essentially orders Faramir on a suicide mission to defend the doomed outer walls of Osgiliath.
Which goes horribly wrong. Faramir comes back struck by a poisoned dart, seemingly dying.
And that is when Denethor completely breaks. He abandons the city's defense to burn himself and his son alive in the tombs.
Okay, let's stop you there, actually.
Yeah.
Because here's where it gets really interesting. Is Denethor actually just a villain? Or is he simply a hyperlogical leader?
Well,
No, hear me out. If you look at the raw data, like a modern CEO or a general looking at a terminal screen, massive orc armies, giant siege engines, the Nazgul causing his men to drop their weapons in terror. Denethor's despair is actually the most mathematically logical conclusion.
that's a fair point.
Right. From a strategic standpoint, why should a leader bet the survival of his civilization on Gandalf's vision, which has a near-zero statistical probability of success? Is Gandalf just asking to be delusional?
This raises an important question, though, about the difference between sight and vision.
Okay, how so?
Well, Denethor relies only on what he can see and control. He's using the Palantir, the Seeing Stone, to gather intel. And the Indonesian translation actually gives us a beautiful linguistic tool here. The word used for his despair is keputusan.
Keputusan. Did I say that right?
Spot on. Literally broken down. Putus means to sever or break off, and asa means hope. It is the severing of hope.
Oh, that's heavy. The severing of hope.
Right. But why is it severed? Because Denethor trusts his algorithm, but he fails to realize his vision is limited by his pride, and the algorithm is being curated by his enemy.
Wait, Sauron controls the feed.
Sauron controls the context of the feed. The Palantir doesn't show Denethor lies. It shows him absolute terrifying truths, the endless armies, the corsairs, but it withholds the unquantifiable human variables.
Like the hobbits.
Yeah.
Or Aragorn.
Exactly. Denethor is a victim of data bias. He decides that if he cannot guarantee a victory based on his own computations, he will burn the entire enterprise down. That logical despair is ultimately the true failure of leadership.
Wow. He optimizes himself right into oblivion.
He really does.
Meanwhile, in contrast, you have King Theoden in Rohan. He receives the red arrow from the messenger Hirgon.
The desperate plea for aid from Gondor.
Right, a literal SOS. Theoden has the exact same baseline data as Denethor. He knows his 6,000 spears are probably walking into a meat grinder. He knows it might be the end of his realm and his life.
The math hasn't changed at all.
But his response is entirely different. He immediately promises his army and rides out.
Because Theoden operates entirely outside that paradigm of algorithmic determinism. He accepts that he cannot control the outcome.
Right.
He only controls his duty to his oath. Denethor surrenders to despair, but Theoden marches dutifully toward it.
So Denethor is crushed by the data, and Theoden is sort of liberated by his duty. But then you have the third variable in this leadership equation, Aragorn.
Yes. Aragorn.
If Denethor represents surrender to despair, and Theoden represents marching dutifully toward it, Aragorn represents walking straight into your deepest fear to forge a completely new path.
He recognizes that fighting a conventional war against Sauron is mathematically impossible, so he changes the rules of engagement.
By looking into the Palantir himself, which blows my mind. He intentionally reveals himself and the reforged sword to Sauron.
He confronts the very data feed that destroyed Denethor.
Right, it's like a high-stakes poker bluff. He is deliberately drawing Sauron's terrifying eye away from Frodo and onto himself, using himself as human bait.
Yes, and that bluff forces Sauron to strike Gondor prematurely out of fear.
But because he triggers that avalanche, Aragorn realizes Gondor will fall before Rohan can arrive. So he makes this terrifying choice, the paths of the dead.
The Jalan Orang Mati.
And Eowyn begs him not to go. She's terrified of being left behind in this cage of inaction, but he refuses to let her join him.
Because an army can't walk that path. Only Aragorn, Legolas, Gimli, and the Grey Company.
And I want to dig into how scary this is. They entered this suffocating darkness under the mountain. Even Gimli, a dwarf who literally lives underground, is paralyzed by fear.
Right, his knees are knocking.
They find the skeleton of Baldur clawing at a stone door. It is pure dread. And they arrive at the stern of Eric at midnight to summon the Oathbreakers, the dead men who broke their vow to Isildur.
Meanwhile, Merry is left behind by Theoden, but a mysterious rider named Durnhelm secretly hides Merry under his cloak so they can ride to war together.
Which is such a great parallel.
Yeah.
But back to Aragorn in the cave. What does this all mean? Why this specific, terrifying crucible?
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture, this is the defining moment Aragorn is finally stepping into his destiny as king. He is no longer hiding as a ranger.
Okay.
And think about what a king is in this world. Sauron exercises power through dominion, right? He uses terror to dominate wills.
Yeah, he forces people to serve him.
But Aragorn goes to confront the Penguin Karsumpa, the Oathbreakers. In a world where bhakti and vows are the glue of reality, an Oathbreaker is severed from the natural order.
So Aragorn doesn't just dominate them with fear, even though the environment is terrifying.
Exactly. He holds them to their ancient promise. He proves that true authority isn't about dominion. It's about holding people to their promises and restoring balance. He offers them a path to heal a broken social contract.
Wow. So Sauron uses fear to break the world, but Aragorn walks through fear to put the world back together.
That is the crucial distinction. He leverages the weight of the past to liberate, not to enslave.
Which circles us all the way back to the hobbits swearing their oaths at the beginning. It's all about the integrity of the promise in the dark.
It's all connected. The narrative engine here is entirely driven by how individuals navigate the collapse of their external reality.
And that brings this directly to you, the listener.
Absolutely.
Because tying all these sources together, you might not be staring down a literal siege or confronting ghosts under a mountain, but when you face your own dawnless day, a moment of overwhelming professional or personal crisis, which path do you choose?
When the horizon vanishes and the metrics all flash red.
Right. Do you let the raw data crush you into despair like Denethor? Do you do your duty despite the odds like Theoden? Or do you walk through your greatest fears to rewrite the rules of the game like Aragorn?
It requires acknowledging that we have absolute control over our philosophical response to the darkness.
I want to leave you with one final provocative thought to mull over on your own.
Oh, I like this one.
The entire Siege of Gondor is driven by Sauron's greatest weapon, which is fear. Manifested physically by the screaming Nazgul. But consider this.
Yeah.
Did Sauron's reliance on terror actually cause his own downfall?
Mm-hmm.
By pushing the world to the absolute brink, he forced ordinary people like Merry and Pippin to find extraordinary courage.
He created the conditions for profound connection.
Yes, and he forced Aragorn to finally claim the kingship he had been avoiding. In the end, does absolute terror always sow the seeds of its own destruction? Does the darkness just force the light to define itself?
It's a powerful lens through which to view any overwhelming challenge.
It really is. Keep that in mind the next time your own sky clouds over. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the source material. We'll catch you next time.